A young man named Gabriel rescues a traumatized racehorse, Blaze, and through patience, trust, and determination, helps him overcome his past, proving that healing and second chances are possible. Before we start the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. The auction hall was filled with murmurs and disinterest as the spotlight focused on a horse lying motionless in the center of the ring. The chestnut stallion's coat was covered in scars, silent proof of a hard and painful life. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the room, trying to spark interest. "Who will start the bidding?" "Do I hear an offer?" he called out. But the crowd barely paid attention. Laughter rippled through the hall, and someone scoffed, "That horse isn't worth a dime." Others whispered cruel comments, dismissing the animal entirely. A woman in a fancy dress wrinkled her nose and said with disdain, "It looks like it's given up on life." The horse's dull eyes and lifeless body made it clear that it had been through too much. It didn't belong in this bright, glamorous hall. It was just another forgotten soul, ignored and unwanted. No one gave it a second thought. Then, something unexpected happened. From the back of the room, the scrape of a chair against the floor cut through the mockery. A young man, dressed in plain clothes that set him apart from the wealthy crowd, stood up. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. "I'll take him," he said. The room fell silent. Heads turned in disbelief. "Him? Are you serious?" Someone sneered. But the young man ignored the laughter and judgment. His eyes were locked on the horse, and something about his expression silenced even the harshest critics. The hall grew uneasy as he stepped forward and made the purchase. After the payment was settled, he approached the fallen animal and crouched down to meet its gaze. The horse flinched but didn't turn away. The young man leaned in, whispering something too soft for anyone else to hear. To everyone's shock, the horse's ears twitched, and for the first time that night it lifted its head. Murmurs spread through the crowd. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. In the following days, news spread quickly about the young man and the broken horse. People were stunned to hear that the stallion, once deemed worthless, was beginning to change. Under the care of his new owner, the horse began to thrive. Its strength returned, its posture grew prouder, and its eyes shone with a new spark. Those who had laughed at the auction started to wonder, had they been blind to something special all along? What had this young man done to bring such a transformation? And why did the bond between them seem so unshakable, as if fate had brought them together? The answers would soon reveal themselves in ways no one could have imagined. The morning sun cast a warm glow over a small, modest stable. The young man, whose name was Gabriel, stood silently watching the horse he had now named Blaze. He chose the name because he believed the stallion, like the mythical bird, could rise from the ashes of its painful past. Blaze stood stiffly in the corner, his muscles tense and his movements cautious. The scars he carried, both the ones on his body and the ones no one could see, had built walls around his trust. Gabriel knew this wouldn't be easy, but deep inside, he believed Blaze was worth the effort. For hours, Gabriel sat outside the stall, reading softly or simply staying close, never forcing interaction. He understood that trust took time. One quiet afternoon, as Gabriel leaned against the wooden panels, he heard a soft sound, hooves shifting against the straw. When he turned his head, his heart leaped. Blaze had taken a hesitant step toward him. The stallion's ears twitched nervously, but for the first time, he looked more curious than afraid. Progress didn't come without struggle. The next morning, Gabriel decided to take Blaze out to the pasture. But the moment the bridle touched the horse's head, Blaze panicked. Rearing up, he let out a frightened whinny that echoed across the field. Gabriel immediately let go, his hands shaking, but he didn't yell, didn't scold. Instead, he stepped back, giving Blaze space and speaking in a calm, soothing voice. It was clear now. Blaze's wounds ran deeper than physical pain. His fear came from a past filled with cruelty and betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and Gabriel learned that trust wasn't built overnight. He tried, failed, and tried again, each time making the smallest steps forward. He started noticing patterns in Blaze's behavior. The way he flinched at sudden movements or froze at raised voices told Gabriel everything he needed to know. Someone had hurt this horse. Badly. The thought filled Gabriel with anger, but he knew that anger wasn't for Blaze to carry. Instead, he made a silent promise to replace every bad memory with kindness and patience. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Gabriel decided to try something different. He approached Blaze with a brush, moving slowly. At first, the horse stiffened, his muscles coiled as if ready to run. But Gabriel's touch was light, his strokes gentle and rhythmic. Little by little, Blaze's posture softened. His head lowered slightly, and he let out a slow, deep breath. For the first time, he seemed to relax under human hands. It was a small moment, but to Gabriel, it felt like a huge Samuel. What he didn't know was that others in town had begun to take notice. The same people who had laughed at him in the auction hall were now watching closely. Some were curious, others doubtful, but they all wanted to know just how far this unlikely partnership could go. As Gabriel stood beside Blaze that evening, brushing his coat under the fading sunlight, he felt a small spark of hope. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Something bigger was coming, something he and Blaze weren't prepared for yet. Days passed in a steady rhythm as Gabriel and Blaze settled into a routine. Every morning, Gabriel woke up before dawn, his boots crunching against the gravel as he made his way to the stable. Blaze had started to recognize him, greeting him with soft nickers, though his eyes still held a trace of doubt. It was progress, but Gabriel knew trust wasn't built overnight. He didn't mind. He had learned to celebrate every glance of trust and every step Blaze took toward him. One afternoon, Gabriel decided to push Blaze's limits a little more. He led the stallion into the open pasture, where golden sunlight stretched across the rolling fields. Blaze hesitated, his hooves frozen in place, as if afraid of what lay ahead. But Gabriel didn't force him forward. Instead, he simply stood beside the horse, waiting. After a long pause, Blaze finally took a cautious step forward. Gabriel's chest tightened. It felt like Blaze was reclaiming a part of himself that had been lost. Then a loud crack split the air. Startled, Blaze panicked, his eyes going wild as he bolted across the field. Gabriel's heart pounded as he ran after him, shouting his name. But to Blaze, the past had come rushing back, and he was running from ghosts only he could see. Gabriel finally caught up to him near the edge of the pasture, his own breath shaky. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You're safe now." That evening, Gabriel sat outside the stable, exhausted. An older man approached. Mr. Maxwell, a retired rancher who had been watching Gabriel's efforts from a distance. "You've got a good heart, son," Mr. Maxwell said, his voice rough with age. "But you can't fix what's broken if you don't understand where the cracks are." Gabriel looked up, confused. "That horse has seen things, endured things you can't imagine," Mr. Maxwell continued. "If you want to help him, you need to find out where he came from." Gabriel couldn't stop thinking about those words that night. What had Blaze been through? Who had hurt him so badly? And why had no one cared enough to stop it? He made a decision. He wasn't just going to give Blaze a better life. He was going to uncover his past. At sunrise, Gabriel stood at the stable door, watching Blaze with renewed determination. The stallion looked back at him, his eyes calmer than before, as if he could sense Gabriel's resolve. This journey wouldn't be easy, but Gabriel was ready. What he didn't know was that the truth he was about to uncover would change everything. Gabriel's first stop was the auction house where he had first seen Blaze. The manager, a stocky man with a gruff demeanor, barely looked up when Gabriel walked in. "That horse. You're better off forgetting about him," the man muttered. But Gabriel wouldn't give up. "I need to know where he came from," he insisted. "I need to help him heal." With a sigh, the manager pulled out an old, dusty file. "This is all I've got. Don't expect much." The file was thin, containing only a short description of Blaze and the name of his previous owner, Samuel Harrell. Gabriel's stomach sank. There wasn't much to go on, but at least it was a start. Harrell's address was scribbled in the margins, leading to a ranch on the outskirts of town. As Gabriel drove to Harl's ranch, unease settled over him. What kind of person had left Blaze in such a broken state? When he arrived, the sight made his heart sink. The property was run down, the fences sagging, the barn doors barely hanging on their hinges. An older man stepped onto the porch, his face weathered, his eyes cold. "What do you want?" Harl snapped, his voice sharp with irritation. Gabriel swallowed hard and introduced himself, explaining why he was there. At first, Harl refused to talk, brushing Blaze off as just another useless animal. But Gabriel didn't back down. Eventually, Harl's rough exterior started to crack. He admitted that Blaze had been one of many horses used for grueling labor, pushed beyond their limits without care for their well-being. He wasn't strong enough, Harl said flatly, as if that justified it all. Gabriel clenched his fists, anger burning inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Before leaving, he asked one last question. "Why did you send him to the auction instead of putting him down?" For the first time, Harl hesitated. His gaze flickered. I thought maybe someone would see something in him. I didn't." His voice was quieter, almost ashamed. Gabriel left the ranch with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. Blaze had suffered more than he had imagined. That night, back at the stable, Gabriel sat beside Blaze, running a hand gently through the horse's mane. "I know where you came from," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise you'll never go through that again." Blaze turned his head slightly, meeting Gabriel's eyes. For the first time, there was a flicker of trust, a silent understanding passing between them. Their bond was growing stronger. But Gabriel couldn't shake the feeling that their journey wasn't over yet. The past had been uncovered, but its shadows still loomed over the future. Gabriel couldn't get Blaze's past out of his mind. The way Samuel Harl had treated the horse, his complete lack of care, and the suffering Blaze had endured haunted Gabriel. Every night, he sat by Blaze's stall, letting the silence between them speak louder than words. "You've been through so much," he whispered one evening, running his fingers gently over Blaze's scarred neck. "But that's not who you are anymore." Blaze blinked slowly, his ears flicking forward as if he understood. It was a tiny response, but for Gabriel, it was a sign of hope. The next day, Gabriel decided to see how much Blaze had healed, both physically and mentally. He led the stallion out to the open pasture, carrying only a halter and a lead rope. He wasn't going to force him, just give him the space to make his own choice. Blaze hesitated, his hooves planted firmly on the ground. Gabriel didn't push him. He simply stood beside him, waiting. After what felt like forever, Blaze took a cautious step forward. Then another. Soon, they were standing together in the middle of the field. It wasn't much, but it was progress. As the days passed, word spread through town about Gabriel and Blaze. People started stopping by the stable, curious about the so-called auction reject and the young man who refused to give up on him. Some offered support, while others only watched with skepticism, not believing Blaze could truly be saved. Among those who visited was Clara, a local veterinarian. She had heard about Blaze's condition and admired Gabriel's dedication. "You're doing something incredible," she told him sincerely. "But patience alone won't be enough. He's been through a lot, and his body still carries the damage." Gabriel knew she was right. Clara offered to examine Blaze and help him develop a recovery plan. As she worked, she pointed out where Blaze still held tension in his muscles, pain that hadn't fully faded. "This won't be easy," she admitted, "but he's still got fight left in him. I can see it in his eyes." Taking her advice, Gabriel started including gentle exercises and stretches in Blaze's daily routine. It wasn't a quick fix, but each day, Blaze showed small signs of improvement. One evening, as Gabriel brushed Blaze under the dim barn lights, he noticed something different. Blaze leaned into the brush, his eyes half closed in what looked like contentment. Gabriel paused, his heart swelling. For the first time, it seemed like Blaze was letting go of some of his pain. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. Just as Gabriel was beginning to feel hopeful, a knock on the barn door broke the quiet night. He turned to see a tall figure standing outside, silhouetted against the moonlight. The man stepped forward, his boots crunching against the straw. "You must be Gabriel," he said in a calm but serious voice. "I've been looking for that horse." Gabriel immediately felt on edge, placing himself protectively between Blaze and the stranger. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm. The man stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Name's Carter. I used to work with Samuel Harl. That horse isn't just any stallion. He was part of an endurance training program, bred for long-distance competition. Harl pushed him too hard." Gabriel's chest tightened. "Why are you here now?" he demanded. Carter sighed. "When I heard someone had taken Blaze in, I had to see for myself. That horse is special, more than Harl ever realized. But he's also been through hell. Horses like him don't always come back from it." Gabriel's jaw clenched. "Well, he's recovering now. I don't need your doubts." Carter raised his hand slightly, as if to show he wasn't a threat. "Relax, kid. I'm not here to take him. I just thought you'd want the truth." As Carter spoke, Gabriel finally got a full picture of Blaze's past. He had been trained for grueling endurance races, pushed beyond his limits in brutal sessions. Harl saw his potential, but ignored his suffering. When Blaze finally broke, mentally and physically, Harl tossed him aside like he was worthless. Gabriel's fists tightened. "Then why didn't you stop him?" Carter hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "I wasn't strong enough," he admitted. "That's something I have to live with. But you've already done more for that horse than anyone ever did." Gabriel studied Carter carefully. He didn't seem like a bad person, just someone carrying regrets. "So why tell me this now?" Gabriel asked. Carter met his eyes, his expression steady. "Because you're his second chance. And I want to help, if you'll let me." Gabriel didn't know if he could fully trust this man, but one thing was clear. Carter knew things about Blaze that could help. After a long pause, Gabriel gave a reluctant nod. "Fine," he said, "but if you're going to help, it's on my terms. Blaze comes first." Carter gave a small nod. "That's the only way it should be." As Carter turned to leave, Gabriel looked over at Blaze. The stallion stood quietly, watching them both. His journey wasn't over, and now, Gabriel realized, they were about to step into uncharted territory. The next morning, Carter returned, carrying a bag over his shoulder and wearing a determined expression. Gabriel watched him cautiously as he approached Blaze's stall. "Horses like him need patience," Carter said, setting down his bag. "But they also need to be reminded of their own strength." He pulled out a bundle of ropes and a lightweight saddle. "We'll start with groundwork. No pressure, no stress. Just showing him he can trust himself again." Gabriel glanced at Blaze, then back at Carter. Maybe, just maybe, this was the next step they needed to take. Gabriel was unsure about trusting Carter, but his main concern was Blaze's recovery. He watched closely as Carter used gentle movements and soft commands to guide Blaze. At first, the stallion was hesitant, his body tense with every step. But Carter remained calm and patient, and gradually, Blaze began to respond. "See that?" Carter said, glancing at Gabriel. "He's learning to move, not out of fear, but as a partner." Gabriel observed every detail, determined to learn as much as possible to help Blaze. Over the next few days, he took over more of the exercises, strengthening his bond with the stallion. Blaze started moving with more confidence. His steps became longer, and he held his head higher. For the first time, Gabriel caught a glimpse of the horse Blaze was always meant to be. However, setbacks still came. Sudden noises or unfamiliar situations triggered Blaze's old fears, making Gabriel's heart ache. But he refused to give up. One afternoon, Carter approached Gabriel with a serious expression. "There's something else you need to know," he said. "Blaze wasn't just bred for endurance. He was trained for high-stakes races. And if you really want him to heal, he needs to face the track again. Not to compete, but to prove to himself that he can." Gabriel hesitated, unsure. "I don't know if he's ready," he admitted. "You'll know when the time is right," Carter assured him. "But remember, this isn't about the past anymore. It's about showing him what he's capable of now." Gabriel looked at Blaze, who stood calmly beside him, his quiet strength evident. The idea of taking Blaze back to a racetrack scared him, but he couldn't ignore that Carter was right. Blaze's journey wasn't just about healing. It was about reclaiming what had been taken from him. For days, Gabriel struggled with the decision. Could taking Blaze back to the place that had once broken him really help him heal? Late at night, he sat beside the stallion, seeking answers in the horse's quiet gaze. "If we do this," Gabriel whispered, "it's on your terms, not mine." Carter suggested a private track outside of town, one with no crowds or pressure. That idea eased Gabriel's nerves, and after careful thought, he agreed. They set a date, giving Blaze time to adjust. Gabriel slowly introduced the stallion to racetrack sounds and objects, making sure he wasn't overwhelmed. When the day arrived, Gabriel felt his hands shake as he loaded Blaze into the trailer. The stallion hesitated, but, with gentle encouragement, stepped inside. The ride to the track was silent, the hum of the engine filling the space between Gabriel's racing thoughts. Carter was already there, waiting. "Take it slow," he advised. "This is his moment, not ours." At the track's entrance, Blaze stopped. His ears swiveled, his muscles tensed, and his eyes darted around, wary of his surroundings. Gabriel murmured softly, reassuring him. "You're safe. I'm right here." Blaze took a hesitant step forward, then another. Gabriel walked beside him, letting him move at his own pace. The first lap was slow and careful, but with each step, Blaze grew more confident. By the third lap, his stride was steady, his head held high. Watching Blaze reclaim his strength, Gabriel felt a swell of pride and relief. The stallion wasn't just walking. He was taking back his power. As they finished the last lap, Gabriel ran a hand along Blaze's neck. "You did it," he whispered, emotion thick in his voice. Blaze snorted, his ears pricked forward, as if to say, "We did it." But as they left the track, Carter's expression turned serious. "This was just the first step," he warned. "The real challenge is still ahead." Gabriel knew exactly what he meant. The quiet private track had been a milestone, but Blaze still had to face the chaos of a real racetrack. The noise, the crowds, the energy. It terrified Gabriel, but he couldn't deny that Blaze was stronger now. He was no longer the broken horse Gabriel had first seen at the auction. In the following days, Gabriel and Carter worked to prepare Blaze for what was coming. They played recordings of cheering crowds and introduced him to new equipment. At first, Blaze reacted nervously, his old fears threatening to resurface. But Gabriel remained patient, reassuring him every step of the way. Still, doubt lingered in Gabriel's mind. Was he pushing Blaze too fast? Was he truly ready for the final test? The day of Blaze's biggest test arrived, and Gabriel felt the weight of it pressing down on him. The racetrack they had trained on before had been quiet and peaceful, but this one was different. Even though the stands were empty, the wide-open space and distant echoes made Blaze nervous. As they neared the track, Gabriel gently placed his hand on the stallion's neck. "It's just us," he whispered. "Like always." Taking a deep breath, Gabriel led Blaze toward the starting gate. Carter stood at the sidelines, arms crossed, watching closely. Then, a staff member rang the starting bell. The loud, sharp sound startled Blaze, making him rear up in panic. For a split second, Gabriel worried they had pushed too far, but he quickly tightened his grip on the lead rope, keeping his voice steady. "You're okay," Gabriel reassured him. "I've got you." Slowly, Blaze's breathing steadied, and his hooves returned to the ground. Gabriel gave him time to adjust before asking him to move. A few moments later, Blaze hesitantly took a step forward, then another. Gabriel walked beside him, matching his pace. Halfway through the lap, Blaze seemed more curious than afraid. By the time they finished the full lap, the stallion was calmer, his muscles glistening under the sun, his ears pricked forward with confidence. As Gabriel led him off the track, Carter walked over with a rare smile. "You did it," he said. But Gabriel knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger. In the weeks after Blaze's first successful run, everything changed. Word spread about the once-rejected horse who had overcome his past, and people in town started calling him a symbol of resilience. Those who had doubted Gabriel before were now amazed by Blaze's transformation. But for Gabriel, none of this was about proving people wrong. It was about giving Blaze the life he deserved, one filled with trust, patience, and freedom. One crisp morning, As Gabriel stood by the pasture watching Blaze graze peacefully, Carter joined him. "You've done more than I thought possible," Carter admitted. "But what's next for you two?" Gabriel glanced at Blaze, who looked stronger than ever. "I don't think it's about what's next for me," Gabriel replied. "It's about what Blaze wants. He's earned the right to choose his path now." Carter nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "Whatever that is, I know you'll make sure he's ready." Over time, Gabriel saw just how much Blaze had changed. He walked with confidence, his eyes no longer filled with fear, but with quiet strength. His story started to inspire others, even beyond the stables. Schools invited Gabriel to speak about resilience and second chances, and the town held events to celebrate Blaze's recovery. At one of these events, a young boy walked up to Gabriel, his eyes full of wonder. "Is it true that he used to be broken?" the boy asked, pointing to Blaze. Gabriel smiled and knelt to meet the boy's gaze. "He was never broken," Gabriel said gently. "He just needed someone to believe in him." That evening, as the sun set over the pasture, Gabriel stood beside Blaze, their silhouettes framed by golden light. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged through struggle, heartbreak, and triumph. Gabriel knew Blaze's story was about more than just healing. It was proof of the power of trust and the strength of the spirit. Looking toward the horizon, Gabriel murmured, "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Blaze snorted softly and nudged Gabriel's shoulder in response. Side by side, they walked back to the stable, ready to face whatever the future held together.